Hello, and welcome back to another episode of B2B Unplugged. I'm Dan Bassett, your host and founder of Brandtail, and with me today is Lena. Hi, Lena.
Thanks for having me.
How are you?
I'm good. First week back after the Christmas holidays for me, so
Yeah,
always really busy.
yeah. Right. Before we dive in, do you want to give everybody a little bit of a background to who you are and what you do?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Lena. I'm the UK and Ireland marketing manager for an IT services company called Getronics. I've been a marketer for I think 15 plus years now. I've always really worked in B2B, and I usually work for companies that have complex sales cycles, complex products, deal with a big buying committee. That's the kind of stuff that I find really interesting.
Yeah, interesting. Well, I think we've had similar backgrounds. I think in that respect, I've always
Yeah.
done roles for like really complex businesses with like sort of difficult to understand models. It's interesting as I was having the same conversation with an entrepreneur yesterday, and I think there's a really good interesting niche with businesses that have technical and really difficult to understand product sets, and marketers that are really good at communication that are able to sort of take that founder story, if you like, and turn it into something amazing.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and you've been like with Getronics, and how's that worked?
Yeah, so I've been there for about 6 months. It's interesting you picked up on the communication side because I think that's very true. You know, I've not worked in IT services before, so I kind of come into this industry sector really new, and I have to learn it very quickly. But then it also really helps me to present this to people who are not CEOs. And who are on the buying committee, so it's not just the tech side, but yeah, it's going really well. Really love this job and this field. It's really interesting to me.
Mm. It's an interesting perspective, I think, because you're never going to be the expert as the
No.
market. So your job isn't to understand why the product's amazing, but your job is to understand how to differentiate it. So you sort of, when you're new, this is what I found is that you learn as you go and start sort of trying to break down the comms cycle as you're building
Yeah,
out your understanding. Um,
yeah, I agree. I agree. So if Lena 3 months ago probably had a really different perspective than that I do now because I've learned more. I've talked to more in-house experts that understand this market more and more. Agreed.
yeah, if you're not a curious marketer going into a role like that, it's really challenging. I think you just have to ask a billion questions, don't you, and then work your way.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. I think first I wanted to dive into something that you actually posted on LinkedIn this week, which I thought was a really interesting perspective. You were talking about the challenges of growth, not necessarily just being the team roles between sales, marketing, and product. It was also about how that customer experience plays a massive part in that, and it's something that I think a lot of marketers miss or they don't get too involved in for some reasons. But yeah, I just want to get your perspective on that really, and why you sort of pulled that out as something that was really interesting for you, and if that's a strategy that you're focused on.
I think there is a lot of conversation now within the marketing community, even outside of LinkedIn, that yes, sales and marketing and product need to work together, and it's the go-to-market engine, and we need to drive it. But this doesn't fully kind of map the customer journey. It kind of maps the point to when you onboard a new customer, but then it sort of falls off the wayside. But having been a social media marketer, where you interact with customers all the time, where you have direct access to the kind of the visible side of dark social, right? The
Mm-hmm.
forums and the kind of direct feedback. I know how important customers are in the growth function themselves. And I'm not just saying churn, because churn is obviously an obvious
Yeah.
problem if you just keep onboarding customers but you don't deliver on their expectations. Yes, they will churn out, but the element of turning your customer into an ambassador for your brand to drive word of mouth recommendation is huge, and I think it's completely overlooked at the moment. I
Yeah.
actually think it's because marketers maybe don't have the access to CX teams
Yeah.
or account management teams in companies. I think this might be a problem. Everyone knows now that marketing sales need to work together, but do companies facilitate that collaboration? I'm not always entirely sure. I'm
Mm.
lucky that at Getronics we have a fantastic CX team, and they've kind of, shown me, given me access to the work they're doing, and I'm very much involved in it, which is, I was super lucky to have that. But it kind of has re-emphasized the value for me that CX has in the growth engine, in the revenue engine for a company.
100%. I think it's about how a business is orientated. Also, like, it makes a massive difference. If you're orientated for your market, then all of the decisions that you make are about what's the impact it has on customers. I think there's a bit more of a trend more recently. There was a conversation maybe about 12, 18 months ago about, is the CMO role disappearing and is it turning into a sort of chief customer officer role where that person looks after sales, marketing and customer. I think that probably does bridge the gap a little bit, but ultimately it's about, are you orientated for your market or are you actually properly listening? And then, like you say, are marketing being allowed to have access to that team and then insight and knowledge and almost help with that a little bit?
Yeah, I just look at it from the customer perspective. They don't talk to these siloed departments. They don't go, oh, at the moment I'm engaging with marketing, and then I will enter the sales conversation, and now I'm with the accounting. No, they talk to your brand.
Yeah.
Our customers talk to Getronics, and that's the experience that we need to deliver for them. So it completely makes sense to have that integrated for marketing to be involved across this go-to-market motion from product all the way to customer service, for sure. I also think there is, maybe because budgets are so scrutinized right now, what I see is that when we deliver a service, the end user, be that, I don't know, a hospital patient, be it, someone who buys insurance, they are also, this is what companies now consider, is no longer of what value are you providing for us within the company, for the IT service, for the IT team. No, it's also what are you delivering for our customers. So you have the end user is now very much part of companies' considerations.
100%. I think it's a big point of differentiation as well. If you're from a brand perspective, if you're trying to differentiate in a like a convoluted market where there's lots of different players in it, you have to, I think, almost being orientated for your customers and really listening to what they want and developing for them is almost your point of differentiation. It's like, okay, Getronics get it. They're the guys that are really trying really hard for the market, as opposed to XYZ company that don't really care and don't engage with their market. So I think you're back.
Yeah, for sure. And as a marketer, there's nothing better for me to have a customer testimonial or a case study or a customer who will happily talk about us because they genuinely enjoy. They got the value that they wanted from us. It's hugely powerful. We all know that people are hugely distrustful of what the kind of claims companies are making. So it's incredibly valuable to have a customer talk about you. And I think if you look at the kind of marketing output, it's so spammy, it's so AI driven, all the bots, all the automations. Having a genuine customer reference point is hugely, hugely valuable. And the value of it is only going to increase.
100%, yeah. An old mentor of mine told me years ago, happy customers make marketing easy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, if your customers are happy and looked after, they will do whatever you want them to do. Like, and if you ask them to, okay, we're going to go and film some customer testimonials, would you like to come along and film for the day with us? They'll be like, yep, let's go and do it, because they really value the work that you're doing, and they want to get involved. So
yeah,
it's such a secret sauce. I think a lot of people are missing, especially in the B2B space.
Yeah, agreed.
Cool. I think you're. I came across you, I think, because you're not afraid of putting a couple of hot takes across on social media.
No.
Which I think is brilliant, because there's so many people that are just sort of like towing the line or saying the norm or whatever, but no one's really saying actually this is wrong. So there are people that are doing it, but I think you're prepared to be quite provocative, which I think is quite interesting. So what are your red flags in marketing? What are things that really annoy you?
Where to start? Actually, I should probably say that I think, on a really positive note, I think the conversation is moving to a really interesting place, right? We've just touched on it. everyone now, we understand now that marketing cannot, this assembly line vision of there's marketing and it moves to pre-sales and then sales and then there's six. We've all agreed that this is bullshit basically, and we need to work together jointly. So I think there's positive moves in that direction, but I think there's still a lot of conversations that I don't find very helpful. The obsession around metrics and understanding what kind of value these metrics are bringing. This is really difficult from a marketing perspective, because you have the kind of, I would call them old metrics. It's either volume metrics, right? As marketers, we have created X amount of white papers this year. We've put out 10 press releases. We've done volume of things, but you never measure the impact. Or on the other side, you get really hung up about one or two volume metrics, or metrics that in isolation don't really tell you a lot. They're not predictive about your revenue, like MQLs. Like, I can have a huge volume of MQLs. It doesn't tell me anything at all about future performance. Nothing. It's in that sense a really meaningless metric. But these kind of metrics are still the norm that I see in a lot of marketing organizations. They're kind of still championed as the way of how you measure effectiveness, because they fail to do that, because they're not really predictable. They don't give you they're not tied into revenue. Yeah. You come in these situations where marketers are under huge pressure to deliver meaningful outcomes, to show how they influence budgets. And then on the kind of other side, you have marketers being pressured to show their value in a way that's not really meaningful either, in a sense that, for example, I give you an example. We won a deal recently, and my sales colleague got in touch and said, hey, the case study that you prepared, that was incredibly useful in the RFP. It was crucial that we could showcase another customer's perspective. And I thought, it's fantastic. It's great feedback. This tells me we need more case studies. That's one of the things I need to work on for this year. Now I could have a conversation where I go, okay, great. What is the marketing influenced revenue slice that I can get out of there? But is that a meaningful conversation? How is this helpful, and who is this helpful for? Yeah. So I think metrics and how we measure marketing is very contentious to me.
It's a misunderstanding, I think, of how sales works, because a lot of people think like last touch attribution is okay, fantastic. We need to do get more people on our webinar, because if people come on our webinar, then we're more likely to sell to them. So that's a misunderstanding of how it works. How did they get there in the first place? Why were they interested in you? What's the journey they've been on? That's a more interesting thing to try and map out, rather than just some, like you say, a performance metric, which is we got these many clicks and then they bought from us. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah, exactly.
I often say to people, like, if you look at a consumer example, if you're going to go and buy a new car, you probably wouldn't go, which is the first advert that I saw and that I clicked on. That's not going to mean I'm going to buy that car. Yeah. You're probably going to buy something because what it said, if you're mid-40s executive person on 150 grand a year, you might go, okay, well, Mercedes says about me that I'm a successful person, so I'm going to go and buy a Mercedes. That's the power of brand, and that whole journey, and what Mercedes have done over the course of your whole life to build you into a type of person that might buy a Mercedes. So I completely agree.
Agreed. And you cannot measure it, and we have to let go of this obsession of trying to measure everything. We cannot do it.
No, it's completely wrong. I think it's interesting. It's something that I'm trying to talk about a little bit more. Is like the power of brand and why it's important in B2B. And I think people are opening up to that conversation, but it's a difficult one, because ultimately people that run businesses tend not to be marketers that are then going to start a business. They tend to be finance people or technical people, and they're trying to, how do we get good return on investment? And it's a different conversation.
I agree. There's definitely a massive misalignment between the timelines that a board or a VC has versus a marketer who's driving brand, which is a time play, right? It takes a long time to build up a brand and be able to measure the return on a brand investment when at the same time you have a board or VC who are on a 4 year, 5 year investment journey, who want to see an ROI by year three, who have a clear idea of what kind of financial output they want to have. There is definitely a conflict in these two visions of how do you grow.
Yeah, it's a really interesting conversation, and I think hopefully in the next, my hot take for 2025 is that the power of brand is going to become more important, because I think
I agree.
when the economies are shrinking and commercially things are more difficult, the more you can differentiate yourself with a market orientated brand or values led brand or whatever, the more likely you are to be successful. So I think it's
Definitely. We know that, right? All the research shows that the companies that grow or stay stable in difficult markets are the ones with great brand. Yeah,
yeah,
agree.
100%. Which I think leads nicely onto lead generation. I saw something you did a while ago, which was all about sort of the outdated issues with lead gen, and it's an area of marketing it's really frustrated me for a long time. But there's tons and tons of conversation about it. You talk to sort of brand new marketers and people that have been doing it for a long time, and even I think some people that have been in the sector for 20, 30 years don't really understand the differentiation between lead gen and demand gen, and all of that sort of dialogue that's going on that companies like Cognizant seem to be really driving at the moment.
Yeah.
What's your take on it, and what do you think the challenges are?
I think a lot of it is just semantics, but sometimes I think we all kind of broadly agree, but we're using different terminologies
Yeah,
or, people have the same idea, but they're expressing it in a different way. And people get really hung up about some of these terms that, in a way, they're just made up and kind of meaningless. But I do think, I come from a background of really long sales cycles and people buy IT services by going through an RFP process, by this kind of really formal procurement setup. And now if you look at the kind of demand gen tactics that worked, I don't know, 10 years ago, 8 years ago, which is the kind of quick volume, drive people to a website, get them to sign up, your paid search and so forth. If you look at the reality of the buying cycle, which is lengthy, which is largely self-driven, it's the person doing research about you, trying to get an understanding of how they would even solution the outcome they want to have. It's kind of having conversations in their peer group. It's trying to understand who are the potential vendors out of all of this happening without talking to you as a brand. They will go and do this research on their own, and then they come and they will have a clear idea of who they want to work with.
yeah,
None of that has anything to do with a lead gen. They're not interested in becoming a lead and to be pushed down some kind of 5-step funnel into like swindling their email address. I think that's the real conflict. There's the reality of how people buy and how you capture that, and what do they need from us, right?
yeah,
What does someone need when they're kind of going out and they're researching vendors? Not a white paper on LinkedIn they have to download because we are magically gonna push their decision making.
yeah.
How are you going to push someone's decision making? I think there are definitely products and elements where you can do that, where you can offer discounts and you can tie it into some kind of timely offers. But looking at the companies that I've worked for, Getronics, that isn't really an opportunity as such.
Yeah, I think largely it doesn't work either. Like I think
Yeah,
we're optimizing for the wrong thing. Generally speaking, and this is one of my pet hates, is when the qualification criteria for an MQL is so broad. And it's
yeah,
one of the first things I do when I come into a company as a sort of marketing leader is let's just narrow that right down, because actually what you're doing is you're just capturing people that aren't in market, and they're
yeah,
not in market because they're researching you. There's a thing that keeps going around LinkedIn, and I don't know how true the metric is necessarily, but it's not really important. It's the sort of 95% of people aren't in market, the 5%
yeah,
are, and you're trying to optimize your funnel for the 5% when actually they're part of the 95%. And if we're honest with ourselves, we should probably have a much longer sales cycle that nurtures people nicely over a long period of time,
yeah.
rather than trying to push people from they're a webinar, therefore salesperson gives them a call because they're a lead. Like you're
Yeah,
just going to annoy people, and
exactly.
they're going to be like, bugger off, I'm going to go speak to the other guys who didn't do
Yeah,
that.
exactly. That is a metric I would love to know. For example, how many sales deals do we lose because we push people through ridiculous cold emails, cold calls, because we bother them? I mean, let's be honest. I've dropped out of sales conversations with companies because I've found that so deeply unpleasant.
100%. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you're the same, but I must get 20 or 30 people trying to sell me data lists
Yeah,
and gen services and things like that every week.
yeah,
And they all turn into just the same thing. They all just go in a folder called spam, and I just forget about it. But if they spent the time to get to know me and nurture me and help me broaden my understanding of how to better improve my sales cycle and stuff, I might be interested and I might
yeah.
eventually buy from them. But yeah, I think it's a misunderstanding of how commercial works.
Yeah, I think it's almost also a kind of a mindset shift from. I do generally think there is that element of trying to trick you into giving me your contact details. This is for
Yeah,
my needs because I have KPIs around it, and also thinking about it from it all comes down to thinking it from the customer perspective. What can I give you right now that will be of value, that will create memories, that will trigger when the moment's right, whenever that is, because we can't necessarily influence it.
100%. Yeah, yeah. Value-led content is something that I think is so important. Not having a sales call to action on every piece of blog because you think that you need to, like, just putting something out there because it's valuable to your customer base is enough. And you can tell if it's worked or not because somebody's engaged with the content. You have a
Yeah,
high engagement score, that's good. Why does it have
yeah.
to be anything more than that? You know,
Yeah, agreed. And it comes back to I have issues with the concept of the funnel where you can filter people through. That you're either buying something right now or you're not.
yeah, even a
A
private funnel.
complete. Yeah, it is. There isn't kind of like a gray zone where you might be buying something. Like you're either ready to buy because you've had the budget approval because you're really going for a solution right now. But you were saying 95% and 5% in IT services, probably close to like 97% of people are not in the market at any one time, and even worse, by the time they're reaching out to us to Getronics, they will have their vendor shortlist. They will have in their mind shortlisted some companies, and we do know from research that a vast percentage, I think the number is 60-70%, will choose some of these vendors that they have already shortlisted. So no matter how many LinkedIn ads you show them, how many Google ads, that's not going to change their mind. You've lost them already at that point.
100%. Yeah, I used to joke with an old founder that he worked with that by the time you get to an RFP process, you've already lost the deal because they've not sent it to you in the first place to help you
Yeah,
write it, and you've lost it already because they've got somebody in mind. They're just
yeah,
sharing because they have to have 3 to 5 people, and it's
yeah.
a good process. But yeah,
It's that, or you're kind of benchmarking against the incumbent to see what the pricing could be.
you're
Yeah,
being used to beat them up on price sometimes.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And again, it's just a pointless exercise, and quite a
yeah,
lot. Certain industries they only work in that way, but you end up spending a long period of time. Sometimes it's weeks putting together RFPs. So yeah, it's a
yeah.
frustrating process, definitely. Um, Hot takes on marketing for this year. Then I think something I've talked a little bit to other sort of senior marketers about is I guess the evolvement of AI. Last year, I think everybody and their grandma's probably got ChatGPT now and is using it to do something. But yeah, how are you using AI? What are you seeing is development look like for you as a sort of senior marketer? What's next?
I use AI every day. I do love the flexibility it gives. I wouldn't ever go so far as say I'm just going to outsource my creative output to AI, but it's a really good sparring partner, and
Yeah,
it's a really great way of researching. I have to say the biggest shift for me personally has been I no longer Google anything. I will immediately go to
yeah,
Copilot or ChatGPT because I get much better quality of answers in that way. So for me, Google's completely dead. I genuinely do not move it. It's AI or social media for research. That's it.
100%.
So I definitely think from a marketing perspective, SEO, how we use paid search, that is going to shift hugely.
Yeah.
I also think that AI is going to bring in questions around authenticity and realness. Zuckerberg just announced they're going to launch their bot army on Facebook and Instagram, which is just the weirdest move for me. From a business perspective, it makes no sense. But I think it will come back to what value are you actually offering? How bespoke can that be? And how can you get your people? How can I get Getronics people, the ones that are really delivering? I need to get them in front of our customers, potential customers, because I want to showcase how great they are. And I think this is something that marketers will need to do more. How can we showcase who we are and highlight the real people behind this business?
Yeah.
And how can we offer that really bespoke value?
100%. I think, nail on the head there was real people. I think that's one of the most important things, because anybody can probably chuck out 10 blogs a day on using ChatGPT.
Exactly.
Largely, unless you are really curating them. But if you have, I don't know, vertical video or something like that, and somebody is developing their personal brand and chucking it out there, that's the most authentic thing you can do. So I think, those old sort of brand pillars of sort of authenticity and trustworthiness and consistency are probably more important in the AI world than ever before.
Absolutely, absolutely. Like if you don't think ahead of, we're not so far away from having deep fakes, available and easy to do. They already are, but
Yeah.
you can, and then you fake people, and you will have fake brand ambassadors on there. So it's this constant evolution of what is authentic. What does authentic mean in a world where everything can be faked?
Yeah, it's crazy. I went to an AI conference a while ago, and they were showing a platform that can basically do that. They have avatars. They tell them what to say, and then they say it. And it's not perfect, but it's pretty
Yeah.
good. And it's scary how close it is.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, so we're not that far away from seeing the same avatars everywhere, speaking
Yeah.
about different things and plugging different products. And at that point, it just goes the same way of boring old content. It just becomes white noise.
Exactly. Yeah, I completely agree. So what is your kind of personal perspective, but also perhaps how can you safeguard that? Because in, I don't know, 6 months' time, at the end of this year, could you come and create a deep fake of me, for example? You don't have to invite me to your podcast. You just have a conversation with my deep fake. What does that mean for marketing?
Yeah, it's crazy to think about how far it could go, and I think I think we have to control it, because marketers are really bad at ruining things. We do with like social media and stuff. It's like they're great platforms. They could be anything, but then we turn them into advertisement platforms. And it's like, well, why don't we not ruin this one, and then just stick to some of the things that we know really work? Like nobody. I don't think there's ever going to be a brand that's like completely AI driven and all of that, because I don't think that would work. It wouldn't resonate with most people.
I don't know. I'm like, I kind of agree, but I also think, I don't know, some of these AI bots are so convincing, are so real. When you see you have AI creators who are entirely fake, who have millions of followers on Instagram. It's nuts.
Yeah, they do like sounds now on like TikTok,
Yeah,
and it's like Joe Rogan's voice being used to sell a product or something like
yeah,
that. And you
exactly.
immediately listen to it because you're like, I know that. Oh, that's Joe Rogan. Oh,
Yeah,
that product, and then you're like, oh, I get it. Like, yeah, really bad. Like,
it's horrific.
yeah, I feel sorry for people like that, because like there's at some point you don't know what's real and what isn't, and it might ruin their
Yeah.
credibility. But yeah, it's the world we're moving into. And the thing you said that was interesting was how you use AI as a sparring partner, and I think that's a really interesting perspective, because it's something that I don't think enough people are honest about, is how much they just use AI and just chuck stuff out there. But actually, if you're using it as a way to brainstorm and to get ideas across and challenge on stuff, it can be really interesting what it comes up with, and it can help you speed up that sort of research phase a little bit.
Yeah, completely. And as I said, I find it so much more useful than going into Google, where I have to wade through a page worth of sponsored content and increasingly also AI content. So, yeah.
Yeah, Google, I think, have ruined their platform a little bit.
I
The
agree.
important things are now 4 or 5 different posts before you get to the proper stuff.
Yeah.
Now with the AI overview thing, I was testing it earlier on something, and it was just completely wrong what it was telling me, and it was obviously wrong. So it's like I don't really know where it's getting its data from, but it's coming up with some very strange things.
Interesting. Yeah,
Yeah,
wondering how they're going to turn it around.
yeah, which is weird. It's weird that they would go down that route, but they had the market, didn't they, for 30 years or so. So
Yeah.
uh, they're just trying to catch up with ChatGPT now. But like you, I use ChatGPT to search for everything.
Yeah.
Whether
So,
whether it's I actually did it recently when I went on I went to go and see a customer, and I was meeting somebody. I was meeting somebody in Birmingham, and then I was going to sort of Northampton to meet somebody, and I was trying to find a hotel in between. And rather than sort of go on Google Maps and stuff, I just asked ChatGPT, "I'm here and then I'm there. Find me a nice hotel that does these things. Has a gym, has a nice restaurant, that type of thing. In between these locations, it's an hour drive the next day." And it within 10 seconds, it gave me that.
yeah.
And it's amazing.
Yeah. Agreed.
There it is. Cool, wonderful. Well, I think that's a really nice place to leave it. So thank you very much for your time and for the conversation, and
Thank you.
for the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Dan.
Cheers.